Hello, and welcome back to the Pixel Tea. I don't know if you all can hear me. If anybody in the chat can let me know, I'd greatly appreciate it. It's good to see you all. Tonight's about fresh eyes on ancient disasters, because every cataclysm carries a hidden message for the future. I'm going to play a presentation from the Cosmic Summit 2025 with Catherine Ulissy Schoch. Catherine Ulissy, commonly known as Katie, is a multi-talented individual whose career spans the performing arts, visual and media arts, and the esoteric world of ancient mysteries. She is married to Dr. Robert M. Schoch, a geologist and author celebrated for his groundbreaking theories on the antiquity of the Great Sphinx and ancient civilizations. Katie brings a unique blend of artistic sensibility and scholarly curiosity to their collaborative research. At Cosmic Summit 2025, Catherine presented her first public lecture, drawn from many years of collaborative research, unveiling a revolutionary theory. Many of Egypt's grand ancient structures were not buried naturally, but intentionally buried by an advanced civilization at the end of the Ice Age, circa 9700 BC, 9700 BC. This practice, Katie argues, parallels the deliberate burial of Göbekli Tepe in Turkey and was aimed at protecting these monumental sites from catastrophic solar phenomena. Katie noticed that many temple sites, including Karnak, Esna, Kamombo, Dendera, Edufu, Osirian, at Abydos, and even the Bent Pyramid, are encased in or surrounded by monumental, what she calls packing, of mud brick and stone rubble, not merely wind-blown sand or Nile silt. She proposes that an advanced pre-dynastic civilization, referred to in Egyptian tradition as Zep Tepi, the first time, intentionally buried these structures to protect them from a devastating solar event, possibly a micronova or a massive solar outburst that triggered catastrophic flooding and societal collapse at the end of the last ice age. She strengthens her argument by pointing to the well-documented human-led burial of Göbekli Tepe in Turkey at around the same time. Excavations show deliberate construction of rubble and protective fill around its stone pillars, a preservation strategy mirrored in Egypt, she contends. Katie and Robert Schoch suggest this continental pattern speaks to a sophisticated global civilization that predated dynastic Egypt, altering the timeline of human progress and civilization's ancient origins. Katie's work challenges mainstream Egyptology by positioning that some of Egypt's most iconic structures may predate known dynasties and were buried purposefully by pre-dynastic peoples. This theory brings together archaeology, geology, ancient mythology, solar physics, Dr. Anthony Peratt's work, and classical dance and media arts, offering a rich tapestry of interdisciplinary collaboration. The lecture draws a poignant parallel between ancient solar catastrophes and contemporary climate solar threats, offering a cautionary angle of how civilizations protect their heritage and themselves in times of crisis. There we go. I had to get it just right. Okay, so here is her presentation from Cosmic Summit 2025. I've never heard of Cosmic Summit, but now that I've found the channel, which I shared in the description of tonight's video for all of you to check it out. Anyone that likes to hang out over here at the Pixel Tea knows that this is research that I'm highly interested in, which is apocalyptic studies and resets. So I hope you all enjoy. I've only heard half of the presentation, so the second half will be the first for me as well, and I hope you all enjoy. And if anybody's here for the live, please feel free to leave any comments for me or any questions. I really enjoy checking them out. And here we go.
Let me change my glasses. I'm really happy to be here because I made this hypothesis or formed this hypothesis in 2019. And so it's been a while. Robert has spoken about it and presented it a little bit, but I'm happy to present it to you now. So Catherine Ulissy, people call me Katie, sometimes Schoch. I am married to Robert Schoch, and the title of my talk, The Ancient and Intentional Burial of Egypt in Similar Fashion to Göbekli Tepe, and Hypothesis. So it seems appropriate to start with a little bit of an introduction of myself. I am not an academic. My husband has that distinction in our home. I was a performing artist for the early decades of my life. I'm conservatory trained. I turned professional at 16. I danced for about 10 years with a number of ballet companies and contemporary dance companies. And then I transitioned into musical theater and Broadway. The most prominent show I had the good fortune to be a part of was Phantom of the Opera, the original cast. And then after 20 years of performing, I went to college. That's what brought me to Boston. And for 20 plus years, I have been teaching at a number of the major institutions. And I'm now for many years with Wellesley College. So a quick introduction to the two of us. Robert and I met at the Conference on Precession and Ancient Knowledge, known to many as CPAC, in 2007. And we were married a few years after that on Easter Island in 2010. So I'm lucky. I have a husband who lets me contribute to his research. And he uses my contributions when they have merit. In the beginning, on the left, my contributions were small, just some pictures and some book covers, a few of these and a few additional ones from translations. Excuse me. More recently, I noticed Lichtenberg patterns on the Giza Plateau, which on the right side, which of course adds to Robert's research on solar outbursts ending the last ice age. And but I need to focus on this middle contribution. I'm sorry. Is somebody trying to tell me something? Okay, I'll continue. I don't have good ears, so I thought somebody was trying to tell me something. So I have to focus for a minute on this middle contribution because it's significant and because it is what shifted my husband's attention toward the sun as the cause of the end of the Ice Age, and also because this is going to come with us as a kind of a side story. So I connected Easter Island's Rongo Rongo script to the work of America's preeminent plasma physicist, Dr. Anthony Perrott, and his work on global plasma petroglyphs. So what does that mean? That's a big statement. If you're like me, I didn't know anything about plasma when I started this journey, but I will explain it for you in simple terms as I have come to understand it, because there may be some of you in the audience like me. So our star is a big ball of plasma, right? And Dr. Perrott preeminent plasma physicist, was studying our star. Hydrogen is the most abundant element in our star. There's hydrogen, helium, all the elements can be traced back to our sun, our star. But let's take hydrogen. Let's take hydrogen because it's simple. A proton and an electron. In the heat of a star, the proton becomes separated from the electron, stripped, charged, ionized is the more scientific term. And that is plasma. So when the sun ejects its particles, it's ejecting plasma. And we perceive that as the aurora borealis, and it gets very strong when we have more major eruptions like CMEs or micronovas. Okay, so let's get to Dr. Porat. In studying plasma in the laboratory, Dr. Porat noticed that plasma takes on unique and diagnostic shapes. So he describes an x-axis, a y-axis, and a z-pinch. Plasma likes to travel in columns, and that z-pinch starts creating plasmoids. And you see them as sort of cascading cylindrical shapes, which then morph into more conical shapes, which the glowing particles then start to create these shapes. The classic squatter man with the dots on their sides, right? My husband talked about this in his talk last night. Giant googly eyes, stick figure men with birds' heads. This is a plasma physicist describing these shapes that plasma takes as studied in the laboratory. Then he noticed, incredibly, that in his New Mexico neighborhood, he noticed these shapes on ancient rock art. He then expanded his research globally and determined that these shapes can be seen in more than 130 countries, suggesting to him that Earth experienced a massive solar outburst and the plasma, the ionized particles, were seen in the sky like the aurora borealis on steroids. So Earth experienced a solar event. So shortly after Robert and I got back from Easter Island, I noticed that Easter Island's Rongo glyphs match Dr. Porat's work. And that's sort of, this is 2010, so this began 15 years of Robert starting to study the sun. Okay, so in the lab, in Los Alamos and globally, and now we have the Rongo amplifying that. Oh, and by the way, shortly after Robert published on this, we received an email from a member of Dr. Porat's team confirming that in their assessment, it too, they thought that it was a plasma script. They were using it to study the sun, but they intentionally did not publish on it. So they said, congratulations. I want to go just a step further because I haven't even gotten into my hypothesis. There are scientists now that are proving, if you will, or demonstrating that hydrogen, this is Nobel laureate Dr. Luc Montagnier, and he did his research by way of water, but we think it's the hydrogen in the water and the subatomic particles even beneath that. But he has determined that hydrogen can encode and transmit information, suggesting, and there are other scientists, Dr. Emoto on water, ice crystals, and Cleve Baxter, who's now deceased, on plants, that there is a conscious universe, right? Plasma, hydrogen, possibly conscious. We think that plasma may be or is the conscious web that binds the universe. Plasma comprises 99.9% of the known universe. Okay, so just take that whole big story and we're just going to let it travel with us as a kind of side story, and I am now going to get to my talk. So if you are going to put forth an hypothesis, or if you're going to make a case for something, it's good to start with precedent. And so if I say Egypt is buried like Göbekli Tepe, that forces me to Göbekli Tepe. Göbekli Tepe is located, I know many of you know this, but some may who are watching or some here may not, so I'll put it in a nutshell. It is located in south central, slightly east Turkey, near the modern Syrian border today. It is megalithic. It is huge. It dates to the end of the last ice age, which is 9700 BCE. That is 6,000 years before civilization is supposed to have arisen. And it shows evidence of catastrophe followed by intentional burial. And that's important for the purpose of this talk. So the lead archaeologist was Dr. Klaus Schmidt. Sadly, he passed away a few years ago. Robert and I was there as well, but Robert spoke with him on site. He was with the German Archaeological Institute. He began excavating in the mid-1990s. It is now, many years later, determined to be a UNESCO World Heritage Site, and this is its UNESCO awning. But we were there in 2010, and so I have some nice pictures that I can show you before the awning, and they help to show the site a little bit better. So this is our first trip there with Robert and John Anthony West, 2010, and you can see this is what is now under the awning. But it is megalithic. It is huge. This, the UNESCO awning covers the 5 stone circles that have been largely excavated. But they have identified, using geophysical methods, they have identified more than 20 stone circles. So the site is huge. It's a complex. We're not cherry picking a little stone. This is a picture, just to give you a sense, an aerial picture. I just took, it was a photograph in the museum at Urfa, and I took a picture of it. So when I say evidence of catastrophe followed by intentional burial, not only the site itself expresses this. The central pillar here, and this is enclosure C, you can see it was broken in half. It was re-erected, repositioned. This was done in ancient times, not by modern archaeologists. If you look to the back left, you'll see that pillar, which was broken clearly. Somebody a long time ago, right? Because its burial was the end of the Ice Age. Somebody put that pillar there, stuck some stones underneath it, as if to say, this one goes here, packed in those secondary rock walls. Those are not primary. Those are secondary to position everything so it doesn't fall over, so that when you cover the entire site, creating a literal artificial mountain, those things don't move. You are packing the site. Excuse me. Again, here you see the beautiful carvings on the beautifully finished pillar, and you see the rock positioning those pillars, and then rubble and fill, small fill went over the entire site. Here in the back, Robert showed this last night, but it's such a spectacular picture. I'm going to show it again. Look at the back center there, and you see the piece, and you see the slabs underneath it. Somebody said a long time ago, quick, put it here, stick the top on, position everything, and cover it over, such that we have a literal mountain. And it is the fill that allows for the dating. So Robert spoke directly with Dr. Schmidt, and in the fill are little microstalactites and microstalagmites, and they have carbon, and that can be dated. That and animal remains and many other things that could be tested within the fill give competent dating. So in a nutshell, the archaeological conclusion, the site was intentionally buried, and I'm going to add following some kind of catastrophe, at the end of the last ice age, 6,000 years before civilization is supposed to have arisen. Okay, that's where I start. It's important to know that this is a new thing in archaeology, intentional burial. It's paradigm changing. And it does not stand alone anymore because Karahan Tepe, as identified by the archaeologists there, was also intentionally buried. And this place, Karahan Tepe, looks positively primordial, like animal creatures coming out. It's going to remind me of something a little later in my talk. I may reference it. But, you know, it's if you look at the bottom right, it has been cleared. Sections of it have been cleared. But if you look to the back, there is its burial. All the rubble, all the rock, everything that was used, the fill has been cleared away from the foreground of the image, but not the background. So we've got two sites now. Now I'm going to move to Egypt. So Robert's work really began this focus of an earlier cycle of civilization in Egypt, and he determined that the sun exploded, explaining so many of the mysteries of the ancient world, from the water weathering of the Sphinx to Atlantis being consumed in a day. When you melt glaciers with fire, that's what happens. So I think that my hypothesis ties into Robert's work. And here we go. If we're going to start in Egypt, we need to start with Zep Tepe. The first time. Zep means time, Tepe means first. A first time, a time when gods lived on earth, a golden age of greatness in prehistory. Now, I'm going to go back because I heard just a few weeks ago the most prominent Egyptologist say that there is no such thing as Zep Tepe. He was on a popular podcast giving an interview, and he literally said that Zep Tepe is a New Age fiction. I was shocked. A myth, a New Age fantasy. I think he used hallucination, but I'm not sure. So anyway, it is not. And the first reference that we have of the concept of Zep Tepe, a time in prehistory, right? A golden age of the gods. The first mention that we are aware of comes from some of the oldest inscriptions that we have. These are called the pyramid texts, and they occur in the pyramid of Unas at Saqqara. They date to Old Kingdom. And I haven't even gotten yet to my hypothesis, but just take a look at that rubble pile there, because that's going to fit in. This is the pyramid of Unas. You go down in, and there's stone chambers. And these are some of the inscriptions on the wall. And remember I said, like, cutting edge plasma physics is just going to travel along with us? Well, here we go. Googly eyes, cascading cylindrical shapes all over the walls. If you look at the upper bar, it's the zigzag of electricity. And I just leave that off to the side. Okay, so the pyramid texts are the first mention of Zep Tepe, but we have other mentions through history of the concept of Zep Tepe. Diodoro Siculo, which translates to Diodoro of Sicily. He's a first century Greek historian. He wrote the comprehensive Bibliotheca Historica, the universal history, 40 books, 15 have survived intact. And I am going to quote, because about Zep Tepe, he writes, some of them, he's referring now to the priests of Egypt, some of them give the story that at first, gods and heroes ruled Egypt for a little less than 18,000 years. The last of the gods to rule being Horus, the son of Isis, and mortals have been kings over their country, they say, for a little less than 5,000 years. So there's another mention of in history of Zep Tepe. And remember, he's Greek. And a lot of what we have pieced together now, which sort of comprises our understanding of ancient Egypt, comes to us from the Greeks. And you can pinpoint a lot of it. Manetho, an Egyptian priest, but he lived during Ptolemaic times, and he is the one who gives us the concepts of dynasties, dynastic rule, right? Families. So much of what we know really has been pieced together, I think, from the Greeks. Okay, so we have many mentions of Zep Tepe, but I'm going to move on. I'm taking Zep Tepe. Even Robert's work suggests there was somebody carved the Sphinx in prehistory. Okay, and that was a monumental undertaking. So to Egypt, we're going to go up the Nile, down the Nile, Old Kingdom, New Kingdom, Ptolemaic. My hypothesis seems to fit. And I'm going to start at Karnak because it's enormous. It's one of the largest archaeological complexes in the world, certainly in Egypt. It spans 200 acres and about 2,000 years. It is not attributed to one pharaoh, but rather many pharaohs through the ages, with certain sections being attributed to certain pharaohs. But I want to give you this overview. I want to explain here these in the lower front. These are called pylons. It's sort of a grand precessional megalithic stone entryway to the complex. And then you have what's called the hypostyle hall. Those are gargantuan pillars which hold up gargantuan megalithic lintels. You have a sacred lake, you have little temples off to the side, but look in the, you have in front of the pylons, you have the iconic ram-headed sphinxes. But look here on the sides of the pylons, you have what I am going to argue it's described as a perimeter wall, but it's mud bricks. All of the brown that you still see in this archival image on display at the Welcome Center of Karnak, this brown is mud bricks, which blanketed the site. And these walls, right, I'm going to argue that they are a wall by default, not by design, that the mud bricks have been cleared from Karnak through the ages, leaving by default a perimeter. Okay, so just sort of keep this aerial view of Karnak in mind, and let's go look at some of the tremendous architecture of Karnak. So as I said, it spans 200 acres. Its construction spans 2,000 years, from 2055 BC to the early years AD, the first century AD. The primary pharaohs are Seti I, Hatshepsut, the female pharaoh, Thutmose III, and Ramses II. It is dedicated to the highest god Amun-Ra, which translates to the hidden one. Ra, the sun, Amun, air, the air of the sun, the solar wind, plasma. Okay, so I'll just leave you with that little morsel and take a look here for scale, the little tiny people on the bottom of the picture on the right, and the monumental, the breathtaking architecture of Egypt. So here you see some of the ram-headed sphinxes, and look behind them. There is that massive, monstrous mud brick wall, and there are mud bricks everywhere at Karnak. So Robert was leading a tour, and here we are in the Welcome Center, and they have this lovely diorama. And look what they made of that mud brick wall. They made it look like a very competent, very designed, right-angled wall. Well, I would argue that if the builders wanted a wall, they could make a stone one, not mud bricks. But anyway, as everyone was looking at this diorama, I walked to the back. And if you look over their heads in the back wall, there are all kinds of archival images from when a major clearing was done at Karnak in the late 1800s, 1870 to 1903, they did a massive, monstrous clearing of the site. I stood before this picture of some of the temple ruins, and I said, something about this looks wrong. This to me looks like a temple suffered a catastrophe and somebody piled up a whole lot of the rubble, the stone rubble. I'm thinking of Göbekli Tepe. I had just come from Göbekli Tepe. Was I seeing things? I don't know. Here's another angle. You can see the hypostyle lintels, and you can see the blocks higher than that. Now, blocks don't float upwards. Somebody, maybe they collapsed. Okay, all right. So I'm just letting it marinate, this little thought that's coming into my head. So I walked to other pictures in the back of the Welcome Center there, and I see this of the ram-headed sphinxes. And, you know, I grew up, my early childhood was Saudi Arabia. I've seen a lot of sand dunes. I said to myself, this is not a sand dune. Something is piled to monstrous heights above the heads of the rams. So I went closer. These are not doctored photos. I just went up there and I took a picture, and I took one section here and I blow it up for you. And what have you got piled above the heads of the ram-headed sphinxes? An uncountable number of mud bricks. Okay, so as I said, mud bricks are everywhere to this day in Karnak. Let's take a look at the mud bricks, because here they are on the inside, the backside of the pylons. So the standard explanation for the mud bricks, there's three primary explanations. Construction ramps. They could build those incredible pillars and hypostyle halls, and they needed mud bricks to create ramps so that they would move the stones into position. I don't find that really a really strong explanation. And as my husband, a geologist, points out, that there's really not conclusive evidence that a mud brick could hold the weight. If you're going to slide stones on mud bricks, that the mud bricks could even hold up the weight of the stones. Also, why would you put your ram-headed sphinxes in position, pile mud bricks over them, and slide then your pylons into position? That makes no sense to me at all. So let's move to if they could build with stone, I believe that they could position those pillars. So let's go to number 2. Another explanation for that perimeter wall is that they were separating the sacred from the profane. In other words, the complex may have been a religious complex, and they wanted to keep certain people in and certain people out, and thus you have a perimeter wall. But remember, I argue that if they wanted to build a wall, they could have built a stone wall. That mud brick wall was a wall by default, not by design, I argue. Third is that it was housing for the workers. I do not deny that many people through the ages have lived in mud brick houses. Maybe these mud bricks were taken, used to rebuild other structures. Maybe around the perimeter people lived in them, but I do not believe that they were the original, the origin, the essence of why we have uncountable billions of mud bricks all over Egypt. So remember here, this is your perimeter wall. I argue that that is because the mud bricks through the ages have been cleared, leaving by default a perimeter. Okay, so this now is a hypothesis marinating in my hair, germinating, bouncing around in my head. I'm going to just take you around the complex because mud bricks blanket the whole site. Up against all these little side temples, mud bricks. Here's the stone, mud bricks. Look to the very back of the picture, up to the height of the little tree there, mountains of mud bricks. Again, Göbekli Tepe lay pristine for 12,000 years, but Egypt has been lived in since the reemergence of civilization, 3500 BCE. So it has been cleared. It's hard to get definitive proof, if you will. But here we go. Mud bricks everywhere, cleared from the megaliths, but they remain, they blanket the ground. Now, this is really interesting because there are 2 obelisks at Karnak. One of them, when the clearing was done, and we have read about this and we have heard about this from guides, one of these obelisks attributed to the female pharaoh, Hatshepsut, they did not even know it was an obelisk underneath. When they did this clearing, there were so many monstrous stones piled to the top of the obelisk that they did not know, those clearing the site did not know it was an obelisk underneath. Now, blocks don't float upward. They were positioned. Somebody packed the obelisk. The standard story, according to conventional Egyptology, is that the male pharaohs who came after Hatshepsut, they wanted to erase her memory. So they packed her obelisk. I would argue that if you want to erase somebody from history, you just take that obelisk and you knock it down and you smash it and you use the stones for something else. But no, they preserved it. Okay, so I don't think the standard story for the obelisk, and that really suggests the packing of Karnak. Here, you're talking, you can see the height of these obelisks, and look to the ground, mud bricks blanketing the site. So a seed, an hypothesis formed, and here I'll read it. The spectacular, I actually love this picture because on the way in, I got this idea and I thought about it, and we're traveling with a tour. And on the way out, I presented to Muhammad Ibrahim, he was our Egyptian tour leader, and I presented it and he had the same reaction that I did. I said, what if the spectacular construction seen in Egypt might be the spoils of an older civilization, Göbekli Tepe, one that suffered a mighty cataclysm, solar, and the advanced people of that time, knowing that their civilization was coming to an end and humanity was descending, moving into the lower ages, they sought to protect their beautiful creations as a testament to their existence and possibly for posterity. So did the pharaohs associated with Karnak actually build sections, or were they just sort of clearing and adopting for themselves sections? And of course, I had little heart palpitations, and I think Muhammad Ibrahim did as well. So that's the seed of my hypothesis, and now we're going to plug it into a number of sites. Hawara, it is a famous mud brick pyramid, right? It occurs, so Luxor, Karnak is further up, Upper Egypt, it's south, but the Nile flows north. So we're now closer to Cairo in the Fayum area. And this is called the pyramid, the Hawara pyramid. It's attributed to Middle Kingdom 12th dynasty, King Amenemhet III. And so the standard story of this mud brick pyramid is that at one time, stones covered the mud bricks, but somehow the stones went missing through time. Well, there's really no evidence of any casing stones anywhere around the site. And when you go closer and you look, you have a monstrous mountain of mud bricks covering megaliths, suggesting to me, again, somebody packed something precious. Now, this is the entryway here, this megalithic sort of entryway. You can't get in it because it's flooding, and I will explain why in a second. Robert first traveled there in 2012 with an NBC film crew and news anchor Lester Holt, and he had the great good fortune to climb the pyramid, and there are no casing stones. There are no stones whatsoever to say that this at one time had stones on it. It is a mountain of mud bricks. And when you look out, you can see that they have diverted the Nile for agriculture, and so that is what is causing the flooding of the site. But I think those megaliths I think those mud bricks protect something precious, and history tells us that that may be the case as well. So Herodotus, 5th century historian, the father of history, describes at Hawara, pardon me, I'm just getting over being run down a little bit from a long trip. Excuse me. Herodotus describes at Hawara a magnificent labyrinth in Egypt containing 2,000 rooms on 2 levels that existed at this site. We have Pliny the Elder, also a little bit later, 1st century Common Era. He relates that the Egyptian labyrinth at Hawara was already 3,600 years old in his time. That already places it into prehistory. Okay, so when you look out at the site, it looks like an egg carton of sand, suggesting there is something underneath there. The most prominent Egyptologist said there's nothing there. Well, there is, because you can see it all over the ground, and you just look and there's areas where the sand is caving in and there's something underneath. So I believe that Hawara fits my hypothesis that we are looking at mud brick packing of something older, megalithic, and precious. I'm going to travel on because I have to. I only have an hour and I have a lot of sites to share with you. So Esna, dedicated to the ram-headed god Khnum. He is a god of Göbekli Tepe, a God of creation. He's actually the potter who created men and all creatures from the earth, right? From the clay. That kind of reminded me of that Tepe. Remember I said it looked positively primordial? At any rate, it's not necessary for this talk. So this temple, the Temple of Esna, it's a new kingdom. The foundations were apparently laid during the reign of King Thutmose III, but now again they say the primary construction is Ptolemaic. A lot of these temples, they say Ptolemaic, but again that's Greek, and I'm arguing that they all go back. So what's interesting, let me go back. What's interesting about this temple is that it sits far below ground level. You can see on the perimeter of the image, the city has arisen around it. And so to get down to the temple, you descend this incredible staircase. And if you look closely, you will see mud bricks all around the temple's enclosure. Here's another view. You see broken pieces of the temple or what was once here all over the place. And this is just some of the iconography. Khnum and his consort Menhit. And so I'm going to take you inside. I will say that just some more of the beautiful reliefs on the walls, but I'm going to start with these pillars. And I just want to say that the temple, since this picture was taken, has been cleaned and the colors are now beautiful and vibrant. But last time I was there was a lot of scaffolding. And so my pictures aren't so good. So I pulled from older pictures, but the reliefs, the carvings, it's an incredible temple. The first thing I noticed is something's wrong with the capitals. Usually when you build hypostyle hall, the capitals are the same. They're uniform. But I looked at this picture and I thought, my goodness, a good thing for going back and looking at old pictures, right? Something is wrong. They're different. Every single one is different. Here it's like willy-nilly. Somebody put the different capitals on all of the pillars. You can see scaffolding. You can see plain, even edges. So every book you read, every guidebook, every story tells you that the reason why the temple is so low and the city grew up around it is because through the ages, the Nile flooded and it brought in silt and mud. And I'm going to read just as an example from John Anthony West's wonderful guidebook of Egypt. He writes, hundreds of years of successive floods buried the temple in silt. As the town grew up around it, when Napoleon came through, that's 1798, only the roof and the uppermost parts of the columns were above ground. Well, there's a problem with that story because when you go to the back, there is not mud, but massive numbers of mud bricks. Now, the Nile may bring in mud, but I've never known the Nile to bring in fully formed mud bricks. When you look at the back of the temple, I couldn't get up close, but I could get close enough to get this photograph. Something looks wrong. To me, this looks like hasty reconstruction. Stick some stones in there, put the thing back together. It had some catastrophe. They put on different capitals. They put the back of the temple, which I read in some books that they said at one time it was the front, but I don't know. At any rate, something's wrong with that. If they can build a beautiful temple, what's wrong with that picture? To me, this reminded me of Göbekli Tepe. Here's another view, and you can see to the perimeter mud bricks. So, mud bricks against its little enclosure. It reminded me immediately of hasty reconstruction and packing. So I did more research on Esna and I found this is grainy, but it's good enough. This is a picture from obviously early photography, and I blew up one section here, and it is such that you can see that that is not mud, but those are mountains upon mountains of mud bricks, and nobody talks about it. Somebody buried this site, I argue, a long time ago, and we're just uncovering it, just like Karnak, Hawara fits, and so now Esna, the temple of Esna, fits my hypothesis. Destruction to the original, crude reassembly, intentional packing and burial. Onward, the temple of Hathor, or Hathor, but Hathor, at Dendera. And I'm going to start to sound like a broken record because you see this everywhere you go in Egypt. It's ostensibly a Ptolemaic, 1st century BC. And then they say the hypostyle hall, which I explained, again, those pillars, was done by the Romans. But when you look over the backside of Robert's head, now again, the mud bricks have been cleared. The mud bricks have been cleared, but around the side, you will not believe the number of mud bricks. The Temple of Hathor is Robert's favorite and one of the most glorious. It is inscribed, every single inch of it. You can see the images of Hathor, the ceilings covered with stories and the heavens and the soul's journey through the heavens in the afterlife. In the crypt, the famous, these are sort of low relief, I think you call it, famous inscriptions in the crypt at Dendera. On the second level, this is the goddess Nut. She's the sky goddess, the god of the cosmos. She renews the sun every day. She swallows the sun at night, gives birth to it again, and so our days go. She's the goddess of the sky, but look at her, because all over her, the ancients somehow knew that the goddess of the cosmos, she has got plasma configurations as identified by a plasma physicist. Remember I said the plasmoids morph into conical shapes? All over her body, zigzag of electricity. From her womb comes the conical shapes of electrically charged particles, plasma. 99% of the known universe. There are sunlight shafts at this temple, and they too seem to have that iconography on it. So again, I say just let that little, cutting edge plasma physics and the oldest temples in Egypt, or that we have really in the world in some cases, they're sort of going hand in hand here. They are now archaeologists, or who knows who, lifting up some of the base, the floor blocks at Dendera, and underneath it you see broken pieces. If they're going to build a temple and they can do this kind of construction, why are there broken pieces all over the base? And you'll see it on the outside as well. There's broken pieces under the floor blocks. Going outside, because again, for the purpose of this talk, I have to sort of narrow the focus here. Mud bricks cleared from the temple, but they remain around the perimeter. Again, the idea of separating, but again, you can build stone temples and you can't build a stone wall if you want to separate people, but I do not believe this is. I believe this is packing. So you can see it here. Oh, wait a second. Yes, in two images. So again, the megaliths off to the side, a little temple off to the side. The mud bricks have been cleared and the mud bricks remain. And when I say mountains of mud bricks, this is what I mean. The undertaking for this alone, the mass production of this alone should be in history books. They are now lifting up some of the floor blocks outside, and what do you find? Mud bricks. I believe this site, like every other site, was packed a long time ago, and I'm going to argue that it was because they knew what our sun was capable of doing and what did. So leaving the temple, I turned around and took a picture. You can see the mountains to the side. Dendera fits our hypothesis. Moving on to the Temple of Horus at Edfu, and it is the same story. You cannot even approach this book in stone, ostensibly Ptolemaic, but you cannot even approach this temple without going through a maze of mud bricks. In fact, the archaeologists are now refurbishing the ancient mud bricks. And this is what I mean. You walk in through just a corridor of mud bricks. There you can see the modern reconstructions and the older mud bricks. And this is what I mean. It is higher than the temple. I don't think this is housing for the workers. I don't think it's a ramp. I think they packed the site. When you go to the back, because I'm have to move to a conclusion here. I still have 20 minutes. I need them. So like everywhere, this is what you see in Egypt. And on the bottom image, you can see low along the gravel there's sort of like a big stone wall, and then there's like a little hole in it. So I did a blow up of that area, and this is what I mean when I say mountains. I don't think that was housing for the workers. I think they packed the site for posterity. And here's just another image. So the Temple of Kamombo, you see the same thing. It's beautifully illuminated, so people visited at night, but we had the good fortune on one trip to see it during the daytime. And what do you have? The same story. The capitals are different. If you're going to build a temple beautifully, how did these are different, scalloped. So I think that this was a re-erection of an older temple, and again, packed right up against the beautiful temple are mountains upon mountains extending as far as the eye can see of mud bricks. And here's some closer images. I can go back so you can get a closer look. Flush with the temple. If you want to have housing and you're going to do mud bricks, you would probably even separate it a little bit. But at all these sites, you see these covering, blanketing. In fact, here is what I mean by blanketing. This is just off to the side. And now this is sort of nice gravel put down so the tourists can walk, but archaeologists are beginning to look underneath. And what have they found? Blanketing underneath mud bricks. And here is just a side view. You can see that new little excavation area, and you can see the mountains of mud bricks in the back. Here's some of the iconography. Kamombo is the crocodile, dedicated to Sobek and to Horus, the crocodile god. These are, again, sort of the gods of Zep Tepe, the creator gods. And here you go. There's the mud bricks blanketing the site. It's the same story. I think this is the last temple I'm going to look at. It's the Seti I temple. It's ostensibly New Kingdom. It's dedicated to the god Osiris. You approach it, the same thing. Rubble everywhere. The temple has been cleared. Rubble and then mud bricks. But I want to show you inside. You've got what seem like broken pillars put back together. You've got bird-headed men all over the walls. You've got the Ra scepter. Remember Dr. Parat's bird on a stick suggesting electromagnetic energy or plasma? It's all over. The bird-headed man is all over the ancient world. But I want to draw your attention to this site because out back, much lower, suggesting greater age, is the Osirion. It's believed to be the cenotaph for Seti I, sort of to honor him, but it's also ostensible. It's also, according to the Isis and the Osiris and Isis and Set story. It's supposedly the resting place of the head of Osiris. Again, we're talking Zep Tepe. And it is incredible. The only other place in Egypt where you see these massive blocks uninscribed are the Valley Temple up by the Sphinx on the Giza Plateau. When you go around to the back to enter down below, what do you see? I said I was going to sound a little bit like a broken record, but nobody talks about this. So let's talk about it. That's my feeling, because somebody packed this site. Rubble and mud bricks. We don't have to talk too much. It's incredible. The blocks are enormous. To do this alone, how did they do this? How did they quarry? How did they position? How did they move? It suggests to me a time of the gods when capability, a golden age, when people could do things that maybe we can't do today, or we're just learning to do and learning about. Okay, so just a tiny bit, you see these incredible right angle pillars underneath, and this is supposedly where the earliest expression of the flower of life occurs, but that to me looks like more recent graffiti anyway, but it's still the oldest reference we have of the flower of life. So the Osirion and the Seti I temple fit my hypothesis too, I believe. And here's just some other images. Our hypothesis, packed for posterity in ancient times. This is like instant, one slide. We're now going to go back up to Old Kingdom, preceding the Giza pyramids, you have the Red Pyramid and the Bent Pyramid, attributed to Sneferu, Old Kingdom. When you walk around to the back side of the Bent Pyramid, you see this little temple, they call it, packed against it mud bricks. Why? Unless there's another story. The Red Pyramid, again, Sneferu, Old Kingdom. It was actually Doug Kenyon who mentioned this to Robert. He noticed that the entire Red Pyramid is a stone superstructure on top of older blocks. You can see the line of demarcation. Okay, and the outside just looks like it's crumbling to dust and sadly blowing away with the wind. I won't even get into Elephantine Island, but I will tell you that it too fits my hypothesis. It doesn't even look like they've started to clear it, really. It's covered in mud bricks, and Robert is standing there on top of these megaliths, which are on top of broken pieces of pillars. Somebody is packing ancient Egypt. Even the Sphinx has the remnants of ancient mud bricks. Where this red arrow is on the bottom, that little protrusion are ancient mud bricks. On the left bottom, you can see above the heads of those two people, those are the mud bricks. And if you remember, I think Robert spoke about in his talk that Khufu, who precedes Khafra, went to visit the Sphinx struck by a thunderbolt. As Dr. Parat explains, plasma likes to travel in columns. We have a hypothesis or a feeling that perhaps a line of plasma struck the Sphinx long before Khafra, because it's mentioned in the inventory stela, connected to Khufu. And you can see on the top postcard there, the line, they've now filled it in with cement, but that line goes from the end of the mud bricks across the back of the Sphinx, and they filled in with cement on the southern wall, the enclosure wall, but there was a gargantuan gash, fissure. So I believe that even this shows a suggestion that the sun caused some damage to some megaliths a long time ago. Robert has identified vitrification. You're not talking about a campfire to melt the ground rock at Giza. Right here, this is in front of the second pyramid. This is scoria. This is done by plasma. Vitrification on the Giza plateau. Robert is in front of the mortuary temple there, and he describes this as a fulgurite. I say a big lightning bolt, right? Thomas Gold talk about lightning bolts, but not atmospheric lightning, from plasma, electrically charged particles blasting into our atmosphere. The scoria on the plateau, or the vitrification, was first pointed out by Yosef Auyan and Muhammad Ibrahim to my husband, and he's been looking at it, and we now see, I noticed in all of our time, we just didn't notice it, Lichtenberg patterns emerging from under the base of the Great Pyramid and the Second Pyramid. We did not have time to check out Menkaure, but all over the plateau you see veins of vitrification and really what looks like just melted rock. I'm on good time, I think, here. I'm coming to an end. So this might be the worst picture ever taken of me, or that I ever took, but I'm going to use it because it's important. Beneath my feet are megalithic blocks laid down, and underneath them looks like rotten rock, as it's been described. I say we must look with new, better, different eyes, because that is not rotten rock. That is rock touched by Ra, touched by the high god Amun-Ra. That is sacred rock, and I believe that is why this has been a sacred site. And if you look under my feet, not only do these blocks cover, but they marry. The insert here with Robert inspecting it, you can see that someone a long time ago, so as to protect this precious, sacred, vitrified, touched by God rock, they carved a curvature into the megalith so as to protect that. Yeah, this is sacred ground, and somebody was protecting, as I am arguing in my hypothesis, protecting protecting something touched by Ra. So we also see this at the Valley Temple, the two temples just in front of the Sphinx Temple, the Valley Temple. These are supposedly Old Kingdom granite veneers, suggesting a refurbishing. They may in fact be older, but they marry to the old blocks. They are carved to protect every speck of that rotten, old, weathered rock, because it may be touched by the divine. I believe ancient people knew. Why do all this? Why bury Egypt? Why bury Göbekli Tepe? I believe they knew that our sun goes through periods of instability. It explodes. Robert showed this last night. I'll show it again. It is a measure. It's a graph of isotope data. It's a measure of the sun's activity from the end of the ice age. The top left, you can see massive explosions, high highs, low lows, high highs, low lows, and it stayed erratic for thousands of years. The yearly increments here are thousands. From the end of the ice age, it was erratic, and then it calms down. It becomes quiescent, more quiescent, and civilization reemerges. You even have the little mini ice age indicated there. And now we have a sun that appears to be poised for an encore, certainly ramping up. We speculate, we think it might have to do, why this recurring catastrophe? Plato talks about it. Why recurring catastrophe? It may be our sun's journey through the Milky Way. Again, I don't know definitively, but I'm going to put this out here, because if our galaxy, and I'll just read here so you don't have to fight with my sound and the text. If our galaxy is a giant plasma torus, right? When the particles come together, they spin. That's what creates the rotation in a plasma torus. If our galaxy is a giant plasma torus with different charges, positive, negative, above and below the equator, and we are in a binary system. So if our star has a companion that forces it into a recurring pattern, a recurring trajectory, and it forces it to cross the galactic equator, this could explain recurring, predictable periods of calamity on Earth. And I actually think the basalt moai from Easter Island, and remember, they have not identified the basalt quarries, but when I read this little moai, which by the way, on his shoulders are birdmen, right? I am not saying the birdman is plasma. Dr. Parat is the preeminent plasma physicist who, Los Alamos is home to our nuclear research program. So plasma, the birdman is all over the back of the moai. There seems to be an equator, and there seems to be an indication that our sun must cross the equator. And is that a warning? Does our sun go through periods of instability, which causes calamity on Earth? I toss this out as one of my last slides because I just like it. I often see illustrations of the God of creation, Ptah. And of course, this is Dr. Parat, and Dr. Parat gave us permission to use a lot of his photographs. Actually, Robert gave some photographs from Egypt, and Dr. Parat allowed us to use his plasma petroglyphs. These occur in Arizona, birds on a stick. The Ra scepter is the echo of that. Electromagnetic energy, plasma. And I always see Ptah, or often, colored in green, and I think that is because that is how we perceive plasma, the aurora borealis, the colors of the aurora borealis. We can't see subatomic particles. We can't see plasma unless you're studying it like Dr. Parat with state-of-the-art imaging equipment, but I can't see plasma until it intersects with our atmosphere and creates the beautiful green aurora borealis, and sometimes the oranges and all the colors that are really traditional with Egypt, or you see it in a lot of Egyptian art, the oranges and the greens. So getting back, coming full circle, I believe there was Zep Tepe, a time in prehistory. There was a time of Zep Tepe, a time when gods, a high civilization occurred on this earth. We hear the Atlantis story. We hear it in many other references. But coming back to the pyramid text, remember I said that pile of rubble is going to tie into my little story? That's the Pyramid of Unas, and I think that ancient people were protecting important information that we are perhaps just beginning to understand. And so I present to you my hypothesis. Egypt, like Göbekli Tepe, was packed for posterity in extremely remote times following a mighty catastrophe induced by our sun. But unlike Göbekli Tepe, which lay pristine for 12,000 years, Egypt has been lived in since the reemergence of civilization circa 3500 BCE, with one pharaoh after the next, clearing and staking claim to the spoils of a far older civilization, one the dynastic Egyptians themselves called Zep Tepe. And I know that that is heretical, and I know I'm going to get a lot of blowback, but I think it makes a lot more sense than mud brick ramps and separating the sacred from the profane and housing for the workers. I think it's a more cogent explanation, and I think it's important. We best start paying attention to the cosmos and our little place in it. So this is my next to last slide. It is the end of my presentation to you, but I just want to say that my husband's book, Forgotten Civilization, is wonderful. If you haven't read it, I recommend the second edition. It does not present this hypothesis. It does present the plasma petroglyphs and just a ton of stuff. Göbekli Tepe and Los Alamos's confirmation of the Rongo being a plasma script. So it's wonderful. I recommend the second edition. Across the top, it says revised and expanded 2021. Our website has so much, so you don't have to buy a book if you don't want to. And if you have young people in your lives and you'd love to share with them your passion for the ancient mysteries, I wrote, with Robert's help and the help of a friend of ours who's an illustrator, Lisa Perkins, we wrote a children's book inspired by Robert's research and the waterway. It presents all the mysteries of the Sphinx that are not discussed in the general education of the monument. So it weaves together a story that presents the mysteries of the Sphinx. And it's book one, and I have written book two, but we're working on the art. And so, back to my opening slide, that concludes my presentation.
Well, I hope you all enjoyed that presentation. I did. I thought it was pretty thought-provoking. What we're seeing with Catherine, hold on just a moment here. What we're seeing with Catherine Ulysses' new presentation is a continuation and an expansion of Robert Schoch's pioneering work on the deep antiquity of civilization. So that's her husband. And Robert shocked the academic world in the early 1990s with his geological evidence that the Sphinx may be thousands of years older than we've been taught, pointing to a forgotten chapter of human history before dynastic Egypt. So Catherine, she was bringing forward this new evidence suggesting that Egypt's grand monuments may not only be older, but intentionally buried, like she was showing us with Göbekli Tepe. And I like this idea that she was presenting, that the ancient peoples were protecting them from the cataclysmic solar event around 9700 BC. So together, their work challenges us to rethink the origins of civilizations and the resilience of ancient peoples, and also the possibility that humanity has lived through cycles of creation destruction, and renewal. Whether one agrees or not, the message is clear. Our past may be far more complex and far more connected to cosmic forces than mainstream history is allowing. And that's huge. It has big implications, not just for how we see the ancient world, but for how we prepare for the future. I just want to say thank you all for being here and sharing this journey of discovery with me on each stream. As we've seen tonight, the past speaks to us in ways that reach far beyond stone and history. It also speaks in energy, in cycles, in the invisible forces that connect us all. So tonight, as I close the stream, may you carry with you the reminder that just like the ancient builders, we too are beings of light and magnetism. Our hearts are electric, our spirits magnetic, shaping and attracting the world we walk in. Until next time, stay curious, stay connected, and may your own field of energy draw in wisdom, peace, and clarity. And I'll see you all on the next stream.
If love was simple, easy to hold, like silver coins or threads of gold, no one would wait in evening light, dressed up quiet, soft and right. But love comes slow, then slips away, leaves me with the words I couldn't say. There's no one left to ask me why my heart feels this way. Just a dream, like morning mist or quiet streams, we'd all find peace in shadowed rooms. No pace in hearts, no empty tombs. But love is made of what we lose, of holding on and coming unglued. There's no one left to ask me why the night feels bruised. Love don't come for free, it don't come on cue, it comes in tears and staying true, stings before it soothes, it lingers like a ghost, and there's no one